Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel. It's Tuesday. I think I feel a little bit more like myself than I did yesterday, given my long weekend in Daytona under the bright sun of Florida, the hot heat of Florida. Can you say hot heat? I just did. High humidity. Didn't rain a drop. Was somewhat windy, which was a little bit nice. But for the most part, I was glad I had an umbrella out there, and there were plenty of trees to find shade. And although we are playing in open spaces, but I think I felt more like myself today than yesterday. Yesterday was just kind of a weird day for me. Before I get into the show, actually, the political stuff that I do here. I want to tell you about something that's a little bit, I've noticed within the last couple days, a little bit of disgusting to me. And it's not necessarily to do with politics, but it is a national story, at least in the United States. It's a story at least in the United States. It's national. I guess you could say it's international. Has to do with the Rio Olympics. And by all measure, it's been a little bit of a disaster what's been going on down there. I don't know if everything's going to eventually work itself out and everything will run fine. And I hope, of course, there's no terrorist attacks. And there's all of the controversy that has surrounded Brazil getting the Summer Olympics for 2016. If you'll remember, Chicago was up for it and didn't get it. Remember that? They had that big gathering. Barack Obama, being from Chicago, was president. They thought, oh, we're a shoo-in. Send Oprah Winfrey over there. And then the Olympic Committee gives it to Brazil. And I'm no fan of Oprah Winfrey. As you know, I'm no fan of Barack Obama. But being an American, I would if you're going to have the Olympics, I would rather much have them all in the United States than in some country that has problem even building a golf course. And then you have to worry about all these, the disease with the Zika virus, and that's really what I want to talk about. If you don't know, this past few days, I don't know how many days it's been going on, 3 or 4 days at least. They've been having the Olympic track and field trials in Oregon for those athletes that are going to make the Olympic team. So the sprinters and all, both men and women, going through the trials, trying to win a slot. For example, in the 100 meters for the United States, we send 3 men and 3 women. And they have a final race. There's 7 or 8 men competing, 7 or 8 women competing, and the top 3 get to go to Rio. And it's like this in the other events as well. The long jump, the pole vault, the javelin, all of these different events. And you can watch a lot of it. You can find a lot of the replays on YouTube. And I am a track and field fan. For whatever reason. I don't know why, but maybe it's because when I was growing up, I remember Carl Lewis at the 1984 Olympics in L.A., and that kind of still kind of in my mind all these years later. And I've always followed the Olympics, even though I know there's a lot of corruption that goes around with it, along with it. But I enjoy watching it. When I've had a TV and there's been track and field events and things on, I'll watch. And to see these men and women just fall barely short, just fall short of their dreams, coming in 4th instead of 3rd, failing by like not 100th of a second, but 1,000th of a second. And to see them do these interviews afterwards where, you know, this is their life. That they've to come so close to being able to reach your goal and fail, and then wanting to go to the Olympics so bad. A lot of them having been in track and field. Granted, most of these athletes are in their mid-20s. Of course, Justin Gatlin is an exception. Most of your track and field athletes, mid-20s, late 20s. So they've been doing this 10, 15 years with that goal of always making trying to make it to the Olympics one of these days. And a lot of them maybe will get another shot 4 years from now. But to see how upset that they are that they don't get to go. Then on the other hand, and I think if you want to, if golf, and I love golf. One of my favorite athletes is Phil Mickelson. That's funny. Fickle. I was going to say that. That's pretty funny. Phil Mickelson. And I watch the majors when I can. The U.S. Open, the Masters, the British Open that's starting in a couple days, the PGA, the Ryder Cup. I try to watch it if I can online. But then to see these golfers, Jordan Spieth, Dustin Johnson, Rory McIlroy, Adam Scott, Jason Day, these top 3, top 5, many of the top 10 golfers in the world who have, and because golf is an Olympic sport this year, for the first time I think since 1912, for them to turn it down and act and to give the reason, well, it's because of the Zika virus or whatever, you don't see any, these track and field athletes, they're going to be outside too, These long-distance runners and the marathon runners, they're going to be out not just for one race, but they have to go through trials over the 2 weeks, the Olympic. Like for the sprinters, I think they'll maybe have like 2 semifinals or something like that before the finals. They're going to be outside too, just like the golfers are. And you don't see any of these track and field people worrying about that. Do you? All they can think about is getting to Rio. And then these golfers sit back and say, nah, we don't want to do it because of a virus. They're voluntarily choosing not to go. Now, I know that the Olympics, because of golf being added, was put in a very tough position. Now, the PGA, the USGA, the RNA, all these different world golf organizations, they've had to smash the majors together. It was, the U.S. Open just 2 weeks ago, and now it's the British Open that usually isn't played till later in the summer. And then 2 weeks after that, it's going to be the PGA that they're going to fit in before the Olympics. I mean, yes, the schedule has been altered. But it only happens once every 4 years, and this is the first time it's ever happened. And these golfers don't see the benefit of going to Rio and playing. And to see them, and if you don't know, these golfers are worth millions on millions of dollars more than these track and field athletes. A lot of these track and field athletes, they're like struggling artists for most of them. Yeah, they may have a sponsorship here or something like that, but they're not some of them even have real jobs that they take off of to do this, to reach a dream, and then these golfers just sit back in their private planes and say, nah, we're not going. And if I could say something to all of those golf people out there, ball golf people, I'm a disc golfer. I've never played ball golf, although I watch it. If you want to wonder why your sport has gone down in popularity, this is one of the reasons. This is one of the reasons that golf courses, ball golf courses, are shutting down all over the United States. There's just a certain kind of attitude. Now, Phil Mickelson is not eligible to go. He's not good enough. He's not one of the top USA players anymore. That's why I mentioned Jordan Spieth and Dustin Johnson and Ricky Fowler, a couple other USA players who are ranked ahead of him in the world rankings. Phil Mickelson, to my knowledge, and what I've heard him talk about, he said he would love to go to the Olympics and compete. These younger guys, it doesn't seem that they could be bothered less with it. And to me, it's a bad look for the sport. And in fact, Rory McIlroy, who's not an American, he's from Northern Ireland. He's a multi-major winner. I think he's won 4 majors. He's won everything. He's won the U.S. Open twice, the British. The PGA hasn't won the Masters yet. He even made a statement yesterday or today about what he's going to do. He's also one of these players who isn't going, although he is eligible to represent his country, of course. He said, well, what are you going to do the Olympics? Oh, I don't know if I'll watch. He says he doesn't even know if he'll watch the golf or not. He says he'll watch the track and field, the other events, the important ones or the ones that count or something like that. This is from a golfer who's choosing not to go. You talk about arrogance. It is a little bit disgusting. I know they're independent contractors. They're not used to playing on a team except at Ryder and President Cup time. But I don't know how you can be so out of touch with what else is going on in the world when you see other athletes, Olympic athletes, who are world-class too, although they may not be as rich, almost dying in the heat, running 5,000 meters, 10,000 meters to get to the Olympics, and then you just sit back and say, no, I'm not going. And not realize how that makes you look. I do a lot of reading, not just in politics, I do follow sports. I've talked to you about listening to Pittsburgh Sports Radio. Of course, that's mostly about the Pirates now and a little bit about the Penguins, and the Steelers are going to be starting. But they dabble in a little bit of national stuff outside of Pittsburgh once in a while. They haven't talked about it. Haven't seen anything on ESPN except what Rory McIlroy had to say about going to the Olympics. And that's only because he's getting interviews because the British Open's this week probably. It's a bad look. I'd like to think that if disc golf was an Olympic sport, and I don't think that's ever going to happen, but just saying. And if it was Paul Macbeth and Ricky Wysocki, these are people you don't know, and Katrina Allen and Paige Pierce and Valerie Jenkins, all these top-rated male and female disc golfers in this sport, if it was in the Olympics, I'd like to think that all of them would be going. I'd like to think that. They wouldn't let a schedule get in their way. They wouldn't let a mosquito get in their way. There was even, if you even remember, if you don't know this, the Pittsburgh Pirates were supposed to play the Miami Marlins in Puerto Rico last month. Instead, because of the Zika virus, they moved it back to Miami. Well, the games still got played. And my feeling regarding that is I don't know if the MLB really owes Puerto Rico anything. These outreach programs that we have for the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball. I don't know if they do it in hockey. But those kinds of things feel a little pathetic to me anyway, frankly. So I don't feel so bad about that, but they still played the games. So it just turned my stomach just watching it this weekend while I was over in Daytona Beach and then coming back to the hotel and turning on the TV and while I was doing some other things and reading on the internet all this stuff about how these golfers aren't going to go. And a lot of them have made their decision a long time ago to not go. So just it's disgusting to me. It really is. That I don't know if they watch those track and field athletes, not just in the United States, but all over the world. These athletes who are trying to qualify and don't, and they collapse on the track and they're bawling their eyes out, dreams are crushed, then these golfers who get to go and don't want to go, even though they're going to be there under the same conditions as these runners are. It's an ugly look for golf. It's an ugly look. And I haven't seen many golf leaders come out and criticize these men for doing it. And I haven't heard much on the women's side. So I'm not sure what's going on there. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. It's probably the longest I've done on a non-political topic to start a show in a long time. But I wanted to get that out of the way. Let's move on to something else. Let's move back to what happened last week in Dallas. As I was thinking about this weekend, went over, and I didn't, some things just escaped my mind. I write down all these notes for my show, and like I said, I think yesterday I wasn't quite feeling like myself. So I was thinking about the Dallas shooting this past weekend. There was something occurred to me, and I thought about, and I've talked about this before, about healthcare. When you get into a discussion with a liberal regarding healthcare and what goes on in the United States, and you will start to hear things come out of their mouths that are a little bit amazing. Not just necessarily with what it costs, but about procedures. It's like they go the conspiracy route of procedures that don't work, and statins don't really stop cholesterol buildup. It's amazing that how many they'll know the figures on how many patients die every year in doctors' care. Well, you know what? People do die. You start finding out that it's more than just about the cost. There's an inherent irrational fear of modern medicine, frankly, among liberals. And so my personal experience with it is working with and living with around liberals for many years in Las Vegas. If they got cancer, they insisted that they were going to go to some holistic route or something like that. And I had friends of mine that believed in crystal therapy, like crystals, putting them on your body, and Reiki, and all this mumbo-jumbo, trusting that more than a doctor who has studied the human body and studied chemistry and biology, went to school, did his or her residency, had experience seeing patients. Those are the kinds of liberals that I've known. You'd never hear this come out of conservatives' mouth. None of it. And it's funny, liberals always like to talk about how they were the ones of science. So there's that inherent distrust that I could compare to the inherent distrust that I see in what we all see in minorities and their trust in the police. Not saying that some of them don't have legitimate beefs with what has gone on. It's sometimes with certain cops. But this irrational belief that crystals can cure your cancer and Reiki can cure your cancer and some spice or some root from some plant that can cure your cancer is about as crazy as Black Lives Matter and these protesters thinking that cops are killing innocent people all over the United States. Now, continuing this analogy regarding healthcare and liberals, in something that I discovered years ago, when you start actually getting to the costs of healthcare. So they start out from a belief that doctors and all these people can't be trusted anyway. And then you get to the cost side. What you really find out, and this is why I've always said that arguing about costs with liberals doesn't work, is because really inherently they think everything should be free. Whether it's coming from a real doctor or some voodoo doctor, medicine man, flim-flam man, selling snake oil, they all think it should be free. As if good health is a right. Well, there's a bunch of 60 and 70-year-olds who have ailments that obviously, if good health is a right, then there are a lot of 60, 70-year-olds who are being ripped off of their rights. Good health is not a right. And so when you get to that, you start to understand really, really how kooky they are. You could have the perfect health care in the world, and if they had to pay $1 for it, they would think that it's too much. They'd think that somebody else should pay for it. Now, getting back to the Dallas shooting and the complaints that have come from minorities in this country for years and years regarding the police, can I tell you something that I'm still a little confused about? And I have to say this, my idea regarding this was even exacerbated more by what the police chief David Brown said yesterday about how communities expect cops to do too much. And he started talking about dogs and fixing schools and, fixing single mother problems, things like that. He's right. And that's also what reminded me, and I saw that after I did my show, that reminded me of this thought. What I was going to say is, I'm not sure exactly what kind of police inner city communities, minority communities want. I want you to think about that. What do you think, what kind of policing do you think they want? Do you think that it's the kind of policing that the rest of the United States wants? And when you start asking that question, you start to realize why we have a police versus minorities problem, at least the perception of one in the United States. See, I am convinced, and I've watched enough police shows, real police shows, like Cops with cameramen out there with the cops. I've watched a show like The First 48 where they're trying to solve murders. And you find out that being a cop in any inner city, is not like being a cop out in the rest of the United States. That the things that cops would be looking out for, if there's, let's put it this way. I'm just going to be blunt about this. You have drug traffickers in some average town in the United States. The citizens want that drug dealer caught. In fact, there will be people who will tell the police, hey, I think something funny is going on down the street. But see, in the inner cities, as we know, it's the opposite. That they talk about it, and they talk about getting drugs off the streets, but all these people who are dealing to drugs, and they don't want to say anything. No witnesses ever come forward. So I don't know, when you start thinking about our general idea of what police are supposed to do, then you start to understand why there could be a problem with police and the communities in our society where there is the most crime. I'm going to just say it. I'm not convinced these communities really want police. And there's probably a lot of, and it's just not minorities, there's probably a lot of white people that fall into that category too. I don't know how, once again, going back to my health discussion, I don't know how you can determine any other way but that liberals just want health care to be for free is the same way that I come to the conclusion that the people complaining about police in the United States, I'm not sure want police in their communities at all. Because if they truly wanted law and order, they would be more respectful of the police. Now, I know, once again, I know that they've had problems. But surely those problems don't extend to the point where they fear ratting out somebody who is a car thief, a drug dealer, a rapist, or something like that. But it goes on. So I don't know what these people in the end want the police to do. If the police are supposed to come in and stop killers and rapists and drug dealers and all of these things, and burglary and robbery and everything, I can see why a lot of these people might have a problem with that. Because when those things happen, these are the same people who don't want to tell the police who did it. Because I know they fear for their lives, not from the cops, from their fellow neighbors. They're afraid of being called snitches. Snitches end up in stitches. Is that one of the sayings? Well, that's not the cops' fault. That your community is, the crime rate's still up despite the rest of the United States crime rates going down. That's not necessarily the cops' fault if you don't want to tell anybody about what's going on and saying, yeah, I know this guy down the street, he did something. You should go check him out. That's not the cops' fault. That's your fault. So once again, if the cops aren't going to get help in enforcing the law, why should they be there? Cops cannot do it all on their own. They need witnesses, right? They need assistance. They need help from the community. It's something that Black Lives Matter and even less controversial community people fail to really explain. At least I've never read it. What kind of policing do you want? Because it seems to me the cops is the way the job is described, the job description. If you're looking at a job description for policemen, there are probably a lot of things in that job description that probably these people wouldn't want to go along with. And so this police chief is right. These people, I think, would rather have the cops cleaning up dogs off the street and trying to make their kids go to school and helping out with women who the men in their lives had deserted them and left them with 5 kids than actually getting killers and rapists and and robbers and burglars off the streets. That to me sounds more like a social program than a police program. And once you start figuring that all out, then you understand why our cities are so violent. Our cities are nothing but one big social program gone horribly awry. It's a great word, by the way. A-W-R-I, or A-W-R-Y. cops are so busy doing these other things that these inner city people want that it's no wonder that the crime continues. And then on top of that, these people that the cops try to help out don't want to talk to them about the crimes going on in their community. And this is what you get. But I got to go to the break. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
The voice of American conservatism. WRS Digital, Red State Talk Radio.
We're back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I want to continue to talk about the kind of policing that the inner city actually wants. That these communities, wherever they are, maybe they don't even have to be in inner cities, the kinds of policing that they want in contrast to the kind of policing that they get. And see, to me, going back to my healthcare example, it's kind of like this. Person with a problem goes to his or her doctor. Doctor says, well, you have a heart condition. And here's what I'd like to do. You're going to have to do this procedure and that procedure, and I think probably you're down the road, you're going to be fine. And because that person is so suspicious, even though it went to the doctor anyway, the patient says, no, I don't want you to do that. I want you to give me help on, I think that this really alternative aromatherapy combined with praying to this Greek god along with these crystals and doing some yoga an hour a day is going to fix my heart condition. What is a doctor supposed to say to that? And I want it to all be done for free, and I want you personally to do it. Now, we know that doctors don't get into the business of helping people to go along with procedures that don't work, that are nothing but magic and mysticism. You know, it's quackery. They get in it to solve problems. But patients, sometimes they're not interested in getting the problem solved. They're more interested in the cost. They're more interested in how it's going to get in the way of their private life, their social life, especially if it has something to do with your heart. They're more interested in their worldview, not being upset in having something that actually they don't believe in work. And this perfectly relates to the police situation. Police chief goes into a community. Here's what I want to do. I want to get drugs off the streets. All right? I want to get some street lights put up. It's going to make this a safer place. We're going to sink some money, going to work with the city on getting some new street lights put up. All right? Probably going to be having a couple guys maybe even walk the beat in this part of town just to get familiar with the neighborhood and everything. All right? And we know there's a crack house down the street. We're going to clean that up. We have a couple leads on a couple drug dealers. We're going to have some manpower in there. But then the people in the community say, no, that's not what we need. That money that could be going into to the street lights, that money could be going to help these single mothers here. And that time, all that time that you cops are going to put into cleaning the streets up and getting the drug dealers off the streets, that time could be put in to making sure my son or daughter makes it to school and stays there. You know, and we're really angry. We have a dog, and there's these other dogs running around. It's attacking our dog. Would rather you do that stuff than clean up the real problems that are making our community bad. Now, what are the cops supposed to do? Just like the doctor, what is he supposed to do? You could draw an analogy in any particular profession in the world. Guy with a backhoe comes in, he's supposed to dig a ditch. Well, here's how I'm going to do it. Guy says, no, that's not the way I want you to do it. I don't want you to do it with your machine. I want you to do it with a shovel. In fact, that shovel's too big. Do it with this spoon. And I only want you to do it between 1 a.m. and 2:30 a.m., only on Tuesdays, every other week. At some point, the guy with the backhoe is going to start thinking, maybe this person doesn't really want the ditch dug. And see, this is the problem I think that policemen run into, most policemen being good, run into in these communities. See, me being the cynic that I am, and I'm not a racist, I'm not a bigot, I'm not a homophobe or anything like that, but I think there's enough evidence that I think I know about, doing enough reading, doing enough watching, understanding human nature. I'm of the belief that these people really don't want police to do their job. As is what we describe in modern times as being cops and policemen. Could it be? I think that if these communities really were worried about the violence and things, they would have jumped in with both feet already and said, you know, if we had to pick between the drug dealers and the cops, we're going to pick the cops. The truth is, a lot of these communities pick the drug dealers. And they protect them. I'm not necessarily saying they like drugs, or they're on drugs, or they want their kids to do drugs. But they do it for their own self-preservation. But then on the other hand, they want the cops to do something about it, as if the cops can read minds. They can't. This is kind of like what you used to see when the show Cops was on. And what was it on, for 30 years or something like that? Started in the 80s sometime and went up, I think, through the 2000s. Maybe it was just 25 years or something. It was no different. It almost became a cliche. Cop shows up at a scene somewhere. A woman says she's getting beat. Cops show up. Find out what's going on. Cops put the guy, the husband, the boyfriend, the lover in handcuffs, start taking him off toward the car to take him downtown. What's the woman do? Start screaming, "Oh, but I love him. How could you do that?" And then they start attacking the cops, and the cops have to handcuff her and put her in the car and take her down too. This is what this all feels like to me. People wanting allegedly for cops to do their job, but not really. And all of these protests are nothing. That's why I continue to say that these protests are nothing but a show. I think too many of these people want to police their own streets. Maybe in a different kind of policing, a different kind of justice. They have their own local police force made up of militants. Like the opposites of those, what are those, the Guardian Angels or whatever they're called in New York City with the red berets. Like the opposite of that. I know, I realize that a lot of these people are in tough situations. I realize it. And I'm not saying every person, but it doesn't thinks like that in these situations. But too many of them, I think, do. I think so. And I have all the compassion in the world for them. But when they are going to get behind movements that are built on nothing but lies and overblown stories, I'm not saying these stories aren't necessarily true, but they are rare and unique, but they blow them up to be standard practice, is when I lose compassion for them. Because then I start to think that there is something else going on besides just wanting good policing in their areas where they live. It has to be something else. I can't help but think that it really comes down to they really don't want policing. They want just more social services, and they want to allow the crime to continue. They want something where bullets are flying and everything, but dang it, as long as they're getting their checks and somebody's trying to help them parent their kids or something like that, that's good enough. But that's not policeman's job, and that is what David Brown was saying yesterday. I should add that what he is saying is the same claims that you get from teachers. I grew up in a teaching family. My dad taught in public school for over 30 years. My mother was a public school teacher, has a teaching degree, majoring in music. But she was in public schools for a few years before I came along. Granted, that was a long time ago. A lot of my dad's friends are teachers. I've known many of them. I have friends who are teachers. But I also have friends who are just parents. They have other jobs. And it goes back and forth. The teachers complain about the parents complain about the teachers. My son or daughter is not learning anything in that school. The teachers say the parents don't care enough. And they're suspicious of each. When in the end, the truth really is probably neither of them are doing their jobs. The parents aren't parenting enough, and the truth is the teachers aren't teaching enough. And as you know, what I believe, they're teaching a lot of the wrong things, but maybe that's for another day. And so it's maybe similar to what's going on with the police and with minorities in this country. The minorities think that they have a beef, but it's a little bit different in that you're talking about lives here. You're talking about violence. You're talking about murder. You're talking about rape. And on that, I think most cops want those things to stop. Whereas the teacher example with the parents, not compared to murder, not as important. And there's some different situations, but I do see what the cops are saying is very similar to what teachers are saying. However, I do believe that the cops probably have the bigger beef than any teacher does. Lots of complaints out there. But he's right. This is probably the perfect time to talk. And I think what David Brown is saying is, in so many words what I'm saying here, at least I can just be more blunt about it, is that what he sees in those protesters out there that were out there that night and on last Thursday and have been out on streets all over the United States. I guess there was a demonstration here in Tampa. Since then, before then, on that day, he looks at them and doesn't see people who want real policing. That's what you get from that speech. He sees a bunch of people who say they want good policing, but really when they start saying what they want, it really doesn't end up being policing at all. It's something else. I guess you could make it also good going back to the 90s when this started, and I can remember when I was listening to Rush Limbaugh all the time back then, that our military was becoming a Meals on Wheels. It wasn't about killing people and ridding evil from the earth. It was about just delivering stuff to people. This is what I think these minorities, these communities, these kinds of people, both white, black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, participating in these protests want. They want police to be Meals on Wheels. And it shouldn't be a surprise that once our military started doing that, that terrorism rose again. And it wouldn't be a surprise if our police did go the whole way in that direction. The crime in these areas would get worse as well. But at least their people would be getting their stuff. And remember, one of my adages, what the Ferengis on Star Trek have the rules of acquisition. I have my rules about what I think of know about politics, and it's not even numbered. It's just a rule. Choosing between peace and getting nothing or violence and getting free stuff, people will take violence and free stuff every time. And if you understand that, you understand what's going on in these communities and the reason that they are the way they are. Now, maybe there can be both. There can be peace and them getting stuff. I'm not so sure. Because it seems to me the places where the government checks to go the most are the places, and people get free stuff from the government, are the most violent places in this country. So maybe there's a correlation. People want their stuff. They don't care about their free speech. They want their stuff. That's the way these people are. They don't care about their gun rights. They don't even believe in gun rights. They just want their stuff. They want to have the freedom to assemble and be anti-police and march down the street as the police themselves protect these people. They believe they have their right to assemble, but should a bunch of conservatives get to assemble, they just see that as a bunch of violent people getting together. People who, of course, aren't violent at all. And those people shouldn't be allowed to get together. They want their stuff. A lot of people in this country and elsewhere will give up their rights for stuff. They'll put up with violence for stuff. Just remember that. And that's what makes policing in the 21st century so difficult in these areas. Even though the violence as a whole in the United States has gone down, we know that the murder rates in some of these places continue to stay at the same level, if not go up. And so I'm going to go back to what I asked you before. What kind of policing do you think that these protesters really want? Is it really policing, or is it just being parents from the government or Meals on Wheels? I want you to think long and hard about that. Let's move to something else. Saw this article about Governor Fallon. Is it Fallon or Fallon? I'm going to say Fallon because Governor Fallon just seems weird. Governor Fallon, a woman from the governor of Oklahoma. I think this past weekend. If you don't know, Oklahoma is one of the most conservative Republican states in the Union. I don't think that it has voted for a Democrat since probably the 70s, if not before that. Okay? So a Republican governor in that state would, pretty have a lot of leeway on what she could say in regards to Donald Trump could say anything that she wanted and probably not have to worry about the voters rebelling against her. A very safe state in which to be a Republican. But what did she do this weekend? And this is why this is an example of how I mean that the scars of Trump leading the Republican Party are going to run deep for a long time. This is going to be like one of those things like when you stub your toe and you get that bruise on the toenail that's like right down by the base of it where the skin is. And it's going to take like a year to grow that thing out. And maybe the nail's eventually going to fall off and a new one's going to grow. I had that happen a few years ago to one of my toes. And this is what that's going to be like. It's going to be a long time before we all recover from this. Because what she has come out and said is that Trump is going to be a uniter. He is truly a uniter. He's going to unite the Republican Party. This comes from a woman who's in a Republican state where she could say anything and probably get reelected. That she would go to these lengths to say something that is so demonstrably wrong, so demonstrably false. The truth is, she could have said nothing. She could get away with that in that state. She wouldn't have to say anything pro-Trump, anything anti-Trump. Asked about Donald Trump, she could have easily taken the political way out and said, you know what? The voters in the Republican Party picked Donald Trump. Looks like he's going to be the nominee. She could say that I hope that he beats Hillary Clinton and just could have left it at that. Not even believing it. But that's somewhere in the middle of the road. No, she has to go off the deep end to one side. And a lot of others have done this as well. We already know the conservative media people who have totally jumped into the deep end with him for seemingly no reason. People who have been professing conservatism for 25 years and then ditch it in a day. But when you can have a Republican governor of Oklahoma and others, Rick Perry, all of these well-known people who probably built up a lot of goodwill over the years, now saying nice things about Donald Trump, they've ruined it. This jumping on the bandwagon is ruining a complete generation of conservatives, conservative leaders. Now, so, as you know, a lot of people have stayed out of it. We know the people at National Review have. The people at Commentary Magazine have. The people at the Weekly Standard have. A lot of good conservatives out there who don't have anything to do with politics are staying out of it. But too many people have gone along with it. And a lot of people who we had high hopes for in the future, Bobby Jindal is a person that jumps to mind. Rand Paul is a guy who jumps to mind. And this is going to be remembered. People aren't going to forget. I know that I'm not going to forget. This is what happens when you start thinking that the other side, we're just doing this because the other side is worse. That in the end, you only damage yourself. If the attitude is just beating the other side or just being 1 ounce better than the other side, then don't be surprised if you still find yourself to be dirty. But Governor Fallon, I know that if I would lived in Oklahoma and I had the structure, the connections to run for governor of Oklahoma, I surely wouldn't forget this. Whether I'm a Democrat or a Republican, I wanted to primary her or something like that, I surely wouldn't forget this statement. But you just know how bad it is when people in even safely Republican states need to go off the deep end for him, that how deep this problem goes in the Republican Party, a party that I'm no longer a part of. And the words that these people are using just so Trump can win, just so he can beat the female version of him in one election is going to hurt us for a long time, I believe. As conservatives, for a long time. We're just going to have to live with it. We're going to have to go grin and bear it. But I got to go. You can go to edwarddentzel.com. You can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio shows. Find them at Podbean, Podomatic, YouTube, and SoundCloud. Email me, edwarddentzel@reagan.com. Twitter, Dentzel Domain. Find me on Facebook, LinkedIn. My other show, America's Missing Podcast, was 146 in the news and politics section of iTunes, which means it's the 146th most popular news show in the world. Imagine that. We didn't get to record yesterday. Unfortunately, some things popped up. We're going to try to get it done today. Excited about that. You can find my books on Amazon. Just do a search for Edward Dentzel. Thank you for listening tonight. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.